Welcome to the Advisor Growth Panel. I've had the privilege to know these fine gentlemen for quite some time. Matt and I have worked together for a while. How many years has it been now? We've probably got an anniversary coming up.
Probably about coming up on the 5th year, I think.
Yeah, maybe close. Yeah, 4 years. That's crazy. Actually, I was like 3, 4. Time flies when you're having fun. So Matt and I go back a long ways. I was introduced to him by another Northwestern Mutual rep, James Love, who's become a good friend as well. And then Nick Lalonde. So this is a funny and interesting story. This striking gentleman here on the end, if you're looking at your screen, is out of the DFW area. But Nick and I met when he was living in Kentucky, and his first sales gig ever was my first sales gig ever when we were, how old were you? 18 also for you?
Yeah, 18.
Yeah. We both went and sold educational books door to door. We just thought that would just be a really enjoyable way to spend our college summers. It was through the School of Hard Knocks that taught Nick a lot about discipline and his path. And so fast forward, Nick has been at Edward Jones for the last 4 years. Is that right?
Yep.
We've been working together in a professional coaching capacity for probably more or less about the last 4 months or so. So fairly recent. But I've known Nick a long time, just high character guy, and he's made an incredible mark. So if you guys are looking at the bios on the screen, that'll do a lot of the build up for both of these guys. But in particular, when I talked to Beth and put this panel together, the reason I was thrilled to do it is because both of these guys have done something really incredible. In the last 12 months, they've both had record shattering years for themselves. Both have doubled their growth year over year. Matt's done somewhere in the neighborhood of, 700,000+ in premium, 700,000 in premium just in the last 12 months. Am I right on that? Is it more now? Close? Yeah.
Well,
good enough.
Yeah, plus or minus.
Yeah. Okay. And that put him in the forum category at Northwestern Mutual, which is a really elite group of the top 3% across the U.S. And for his year in the business, which he just crossed over his first 5 years in the business, that's a really, really big deal to have hit forum prior to hitting his 5-year mark. So major accomplishment there. And then back to Nick. In addition, by the way, Matt also runs growth and development for the San Antonio office. So born and raised in San Antonio, growing up there, he's got a really interesting story if you ever get a chance to talk to him about how he got into music prior to getting into the profession itself. But in addition to being a successful producer, he's also grown one of the top college unit intern groups in the entire U.S. His intern group was top 5 in the U.S. out of all the Northwestern Mutual intern groups. So successful leader, successful producer, that's Matt, who you'll be hearing from today. Nick also at the point of joining Edward Jones has been one of the fastest to grow in that business. And in those 4 years, in particular, just over the last 12 months, I think the rolling 12 that you hit is, what's your number right now for your rolling 12?
40 million.
Yeah, that's what I just wanted to be sure before I said it, but 40 million in the last 12 months of new assets under management, which is really incredible. So, Nick, in addition to Matt, has really doubled down on his production, in particular in the last 6 months during these cataclysmic COVID-19 events and pandemics and all the craziness we've faced in this world. Both of these folks have learned how to grow through it. Nick's specialization has been in 401k. He's was recognized as the elite status with Paychex as a partner to them in helping facilitate the 401ks for businesses. And both of them were some of the youngest in the state of Texas to get their CFP as well. So both of these guys just have it in their blood to a degree, that the work ethic to really drive. But they've also done things differently in order to grow. And so what we're going to highlight today, and what the focus of this panel is really going to be on, is how did these guys make the leap? They've had successful beginnings to their career, but they managed to double what had already been successful. And that takes something different to accomplish. And so we're going to highlight the mindset. We're going to highlight some of the systems they have in place. And we're also going to spend time on the skills that they've developed along the way. And so help me welcome these guys and joining in. And this is actually, I just kind of mentioned skills, motivation, and systems are going to be the focus of this. Thank you guys both for being here, guys, and taking time out of your schedule to teach and train.
Thank you.
No problem. Thanks.
Mindset. So this is a big one for us. So getting to know you guys. One of the things that I always love to highlight is that we could talk systems and skills all day long, but fundamentally, one of the biggest reasons that I think you've both been so successful, in particular during times where other people are just burying their head in the sand saying, tell me when this pandemic's over, and you guys had a totally different reaction. And it has to do with how you guys make decisions about your practice. It has to do with how you guys think and analyze things. It has to do with how you guys have a mindset that's different around things like when you feel bad or you don't feel like as motivated one day, how you guys process and handle that. And so let's just spend the first couple of questions really digging into mindset. And so one of the things that I wanted to lead with is I guess we can kind of just start with the decision-making principles that you feel like you have in your practice. So Nick, why don't we start with you? If you had to articulate to everyone on here, maybe one or two of your key principles that you feel like help you make decisions around your practice, and maybe principles around your mindset. What are a couple of those principles? And on top of that, well, answer that question first and I'll go deeper.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll first start off by saying we're in a service-related industry. And so for me, whenever I'm making a choice for our practice, it's always, is this going to be in the best interest of my clients? The emphasis is always, are we delivering the ideal client experience? As I'm talking to Cindy, my branch partner, I want to make sure that if we had a client, sitting in an empty seat next to us, would they be proud of the decisions that we're making as we move forward? So that's probably a guiding principle for how we operate. But in terms of growth and in terms of keeping that mindset, I had a video sent to me back in March, and this was at the very start of COVID. And it was by a sports psychologist called Jason Selk. So he worked with like the St. Louis Cardinals and helped them become a championship baseball club. But now he somehow got into the business of working with advisors. And one of the things he talks about is when we feel a lack of security or a lack of control, we start to operate from a victim mentality. And he said it's impossible when we're operating from a victim mentality to operate from a growth mentality. And so I really thought a lot about that in March. With COVID, there were so many things that we couldn't control. There were so many, new norms that we were moving into. And one of the things Jason Selk talks a lot about is if you can get all over one thing, you immediately move from a victim mentality to a growth mindset. And so for me, my one thing back in March is I can control being proactive with my clients and being proactive with my prospective clients. And that immediately moved me into a growth mindset back in March. So for me, that's a guiding principle.
Yeah, I totally enjoy hearing that. And I remember you sent me that video, which was really good. Before we toss this one over to Matt, just go a little bit deeper here, and I'm going to kind of follow up on this. So from observing Nick in a bunch of different environments, here's an observation, Nick, and you can comment on this if you'd like. But I've seen you are, to me, you're like the Arnold Schwarzenegger of financial advising. And here's what I mean by that. Like, Nick, and you can totally tell me if I'm wrong, but Nick is the guy who puts the reps in at the gym, for 4 hours. I don't know how long you actually go to the gym. I know you're really disciplined in that area of your life, but you go in and you put in the reps every single day. And part of the mindset that I appreciate that you have is that you represent the word that Arnold Schwarzenegger does. He's like on my vision board, and it's just discipline, right? You're the number of how many dials did you consistently make just over the last couple of years? What was your dial goal every single week on?
Gosh. Yeah. Last year, when I was tracking, I made about 20,000.
20,000. Yeah. And that averages out to being roughly, weekly
like probably close to 400 a week.
400 a week. So, just, total dial focus. And that's just the base level reps in the gym. And I feel like that summarizes a huge part of your mindset too. I mean, quick follow-up question, then I'll pivot over to Matt, but I want to hear you speak to this. What keeps you consistent and motivated to do that?
I would say, probably the biggest thing is, there are plenty of days that I come into the office and I don't feel like making the dials. But for me, as a solo practitioner, if I'm not making the dials and I'm not moving towards my goal, so the pain of not moving towards my goal is almost worse than actually having to come in and put in the work. But the second thing is going back to just controlling what I can control. And I'm a big sports junkie, love football, even though I went to the University of Kentucky and we don't have a football team. And but Alabama football, that's one of the things they talk a lot about. They never talk about results. They never talk about championships. They never talk about being a first-round draft pick. What they talk about is, are you going into the weight room? Are you squeezing it out every single rep, right? Are you finishing your routes? And they talk about everything it takes to be a champion. So they really hone in on the inputs. And for me, over the past 4 years, I have output goals, but that's not what drives me on a daily basis. It's what does it take to get to that, and it's all input based. So yeah, last year, for instance, I had a dial goal every week that I had to hit, and there just wasn't any excuse to not hit it.
Yeah, I love that. I appreciate you sharing. Good analogy. Matt, you can just kind of speak to the same initial question, which is what are some of the decision-making principles that you operate on day in and day out that have helped you build the practice that you've had? I mean, it's not, you didn't hit form overnight. You hit it way earlier than almost anybody at Northwestern by achieving that prior to your 5th year. Of course, it was a buildup of a lot of reps of your own, right? But what are some of the decision-making principles that you feel like have helped you get to where you are?
So there's I think a few things, and Nick hit on a lot of them. A lot of it is kind of when we start our day, what are we thinking? What are we operating with? Which kind of bourbon do you put in your coffee? And, you have to make critical decisions, right? I'm sorry I had to throw something in there or else it wouldn't be genuine. Just kidding. I don't drink that early. So from a mindset perspective, I think you talked about the pain of tomorrow. So a big thing that I knew, again, only having so much from like a staffing perspective or whatever I hired when I was early in the business, I spent a lot of time, doing everything across the spectrum as far as how to run this business. And I realized that at the end of the day, if I didn't do it, it would just kind of have to be done by me just at a later point. So a lot of it was, well, is it worth to take a couple minute break or cut my day off earlier or sleep in when I knew that tomorrow it was just going to compound and I was probably going to be more stressed, more high strung, devote less time to the things that I wanted to. And that helped drive a lot of my, well, it's 6:30 p.m. It's 10 p.m. I still can do more because I might as well knock it out today then versus tomorrow, have a fresh day. So that pain of tomorrow was very, very big. But I guess underlying there is, I struggle as I talk to new advisors and people in the business around, like, this business is just simply too difficult if you don't really understand why you're doing the things you have to do on a daily basis. We can make great money and have great lives and impact a lot of people. But at the end of the day, if whatever that end game goal is, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 10 years, if it's not big, and I don't mean like I get to buy a house and I pay it off my debt, that's a byproduct, right? Kind of, it's an output. It's is me working 10, 12, 15 hours some days, if not longer, always making sure that I hit my goal. If that's that important to me and it's, helping me achieve a bigger goal, then all those things don't feel like a whole lot of work anymore.
I can definitely appreciate that. One of the things that I was thinking about just with you, I feel like you are the perpetual student of the game, and that's been a huge edge for you as well. Like, just kind of commenting from a third-party observer over here. If everybody on this webinar paid attention as we were going into the bios for each of the interviewers today, how How many accreditations do you have next to your name?
Like 4 or so.
And what
5.
time span did you get all those accreditations?
So I finished all of them. I had just completed for like the bulk of them, I had just completed my 3rd full-time year.
Yes.
Yeah.
So in 3 years into the business, you've gotten 4 or 5 accreditations, including one of the youngest to get your CFP, while simultaneously, so people that typically go down that pathway feel like they have to sacrifice production to do it. But simultaneously, you have always been one of the top in production in the Austin, San Antonio offices. And in addition to that, you also had the CUD responsibilities. So what the commonality I see that you and Nick have is just an extraordinary work ethic for sure. There's no doubt that there's a principle in both of you guys that I want this thing and I'm willing to really go to work to make it happen, right? No matter what. The second thing is just your freaking curiosity to learn about everything. So just very quickly, but maybe you could just speak to that. Like, where does that kind of curiosity come from? Why get all those accreditations in your first 3 years? What kind of drove that decision-making process?
Yes, I think early on. So I was 21, maybe 22. Advisor years like dog years, right? So I'm like 62, I think, at this point. But like in the early years, we already start off at a disadvantage with our clients. Everyone comes in hesitant, not sure what to expect. You're kind of on the defensive from the get-go. That it didn't help that I was 21, 22, and I knew that I had the capability to work with really complex and advanced clients, but there wasn't a whole lot of. There's only so much that they can go. Well, we'll talk to you and give you what you need to do your job, because there wasn't enough value that I could provide because I was so far in the negative being in my early 20s. Yet as you chip away at those designations and you start to realize that, I don't know, the last census said somewhere in the realm of like 65 to 70,000 CFPs, most that are aging out of the business or in academia, not even practicing. When you start to do that, and then you also tackle on all the other ones, you start to realize that there's actually not a whole lot of you. So people who are really gonna have complicated scenarios and things that they know that they're going to have to put a lot of trust into the people they're working with, there were a whole lot of options for them. So it does help to distinguish. Now, it doesn't make up that you still have to know stuff. And I spent a lot of time learning about things that are really specific and down some really deep rabbit holes, but it gave me a lot of confidence. It gave me the confidence to know that you could put someone in front of me worth $50 million, and I may not have all the answers, but I have enough to get them to at least be one to, asking the right questions and realizing that maybe they don't have it all solved.
Yeah. Well said. That's huge. Love that. So I'm going to flip over to Nick, and then Matt, I'm going to probably ask you this exact same question because this is a big one. So part of doing this growth advisor panel right now, so it's good to hear this backstory of your mindset and principles. And it's good to see how you guys applied that, particularly in the last, 5 months, right? Since the environment in our world has shifted. Such a big indicator, and why you're on here today is because you guys have grown hand over foot when other people have plateaued or even gone backwards in their business. And so I think it's a really big lesson there. So kind of two questions around this. One is, what's the biggest transformation you've seen in yourself from when you started, or your lower production years, and now, and in particular, what change occurred that caused these last 6 months to be major growth months for you? Nick, you want to handle this one first, and then Matt can pick up from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this goes back to what Matt was talking about, sitting in front of a $50 million client. And I mean, the first time I did that, I was just overwhelmed, right? I didn't know if I could do it. I wasn't confident. And I think so much what separates our average advisors from our top producers in the industry is belief barrier. It's knowing that you can. It's knowing that you know the material. It's knowing that you can help these prospective clients and/or clients. And so for me, every single year that I've accomplished more, my belief barrier just gets that much bigger. And so I have no doubt one day, right, we're talking about 40 million over the past 12 months. I have no doubt one day that number is going to be 100 million, right? Same thing for Matt. He just hit form in fastest ever and is bringing in 700,000. I have no doubt that this guy is going to be doing like 2 million over a 12-month period. And that's because his belief barrier is getting higher and higher over time. So it's pretty amazing. I mean, I've just seen it over and over again just with folks I've coached, right? It's, 40 million sounds like a lot until you do it. And then your belief barrier just naturally gets bigger. So I think that's probably the biggest thing since I started 4 years ago, is that increased belief barrier. In terms of what's changed with COVID since March timeframe, I think just knowing that this is truly an opportunity, right? And anytime there's this much adversity or disruption, there are business owners who are going to take advantage of it, and there are business owners who are going to hide, and put their head in the sand. And so for me, this is an opportunity to really grow my practice and to really serve people really well.
Yeah, super well said. And just one last tack on question. Is there any particular, so March happens, right? And like the economy is tanking, end of February? Isn't that when it like just hit rock bottom for the most part to date, right? Was that end of February,
Yeah.
beginning, I think. And then we get into March and it's just like, what the heck, that no one can meet or talk to each other, medicals, like people aren't sure how to handle the medicals on the insurance. But like, so all this is happening. It's just kind of screwed up the normal rhythm of what you could do when you're doing in-person meetings or doing face-to-faces. Just quickly, how did you adjust to that and continue growing your business in that window of time?
Yeah, we had to, right? I mean, Edward Jones came out in March and said, hey, we're not going to be visiting with clients face to face anymore. So I think it's about adapting. It's about figuring out, well, how do you appeal to clients now? So I have plenty of clients who aren't comfortable with Zoom and WebExes before, who are now pros and can probably teach me how to use it better than I know how to use it. But there's a lot of different ways in which you can appeal and still prospect to clients, whether it's through digital seminars or LinkedIn or just making dials to businesses or residential dials. So, really, I think it goes back to what we had talked about before, controlling what you can control. I don't try to get too caught up in what I can't control, right? It is what it is. And so how do we proceed moving forward? And really, how do we take advantage of this and use it as an opportunity?
So people still will give you money over Zoom, huh? Crazy.
Surprisingly.
Awesome. I love it. Matt, tackle this one, transformation. Like, what do you think is your biggest transformation that you've experienced from, prior to being, when we're doing 250, 300,000 in premium to doing 750,000 in premium? I mean, the results always come, later than the transformation does, but what are some of the biggest changes you've seen in yourself that helped you accomplish that? And then speak to, in particular, kind of this March timeframe and how you manage that.
And all different. Nick, he was saying nice things about me. I'll let him just keep doing that. No, I'm just kidding. So, yeah, I think like he had mentioned, though, in any volatile time or recession or whatever you want to call things these days, there's always opportunity, and just a matter of how are you finding it, right? Because come December, everything's at a peak. Everyone's happy. You have to find opportunities with one method or tactic. And then when all of a sudden, when it flips everything on its head, you just have to, the opportunity is still there. It's just about the way you approach things. So, I found that when I say this, and I would prefer that everything was back like it was in 2019, where the market's good and everyone's happy and nothing can go wrong. But at the same time, things were too good for too long that people forgot what it was like when things aren't good, and they don't plan for it, right? People don't want safe dollars when the market, because the market was so well for a decade. People don't want to talk about they're getting sick, they're hurting, they're passing away. Like none of that is on the, spectrum in 2019, but all of a sudden now in 2020, those can happen, right? Because that's just how it works, right? So understanding how you can position things during these times is really important, but realizing that the clients you have, complicated situations, the higher net worth clients, things like that, they there's still opportunities. I mean, people right now are just not calling on these people because they're going, well, they're in business, they're in the oil and gas space, they got a lot going on. We don't want to add any more stress or tension. And I'm going, perfect. That buys me all the time in the world to call those people because they need it more than ever now. Because I see it with my complicated clients that I'm doing a lot more service work because we did position some relatively complicated things, but they need to make sure that when it's time to stress test and put a pen to paper that the plan's going to work out like we said it was, but at least they just got an opportunity a little prematurely to test that. So that was the huge opportunity. And the mindset there is just going, well, do we just take this as everyone else and it says it's an excuse? I don't have to work as much. We could. Nick is doing well. I'm doing well. I could have taken time off and just been like, well, I'll just milk this as a vacation for a bit and wait till things pick back up. And that would have been a whole lot easier than working hard, promise. But, instead we say, well, or let's double down and let's go find those opportunities right now when no one else is willing to put the work in. Because I think everyone, including us, look for excuses why we don't do things, but it's so much more impressive and so much more powerful whenever you're the one out there seeking and driving business at that time because everyone else is burying their head in the sands, like you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, it's like, the way your brains automatically go when there's an event is, it's just kind of like an automatic thing. You just go to, how can we make, lemonade out of this lemon? Like what do our clients really need right now in this moment of fear? And when people are uncertain, and uncertainty is a huge time to have coaches in your life, right? And to a degree, I see what you guys do in financial service arena is you're coaches, like you're guiding and coaching people on how to be smart and intelligent with their planning and their strategy, because people are emotional creatures and your job is to teach them how to be less emotional about their money. And so you saw that as an opportunity to go out and reach out to people that were prone to maybe not make wise decisions, not plan accordingly, and help, honestly create the urgency and help them take action. Right. So I think both of you guys had that mindset during that time. And so it was a natural pivot. I love that. Thanks for speaking to that. We can honestly spend an hour easily just on mindset, because I know we could go deeper in all of these areas. But there are folks on here for sure that want to know some skill stuff, some system stuff. So let's chat a little bit about and kind of just barely shift over. I'm going to actually jump into skills next, because we're kind of on the topic a little bit already. Even when there's not a pandemic, one of the biggest objections that people in the advisor insurance industry face is what we call at Southwestern, we call the procrastination objection, right? And the procrastination objection is sometimes spoken. It's when they say, hey, Matt, this sounds great. Give me your business card. Let me get back to you in 12 months or a couple of years. So they push off, or they say nothing and they just ghost you, right? Or they don't follow through on the medicals. They don't follow through on the paperwork. And then, we've all experienced that in one way or another, procrastination. So I know you guys aren't immune to it. I know it happens to you guys as well. But what I want you to speak to is I think you guys are both equipped in a way that allows this to happen less to you than it may to others. And so, Matt, I'm going to start with you and then I'm going to pivot over to Nick since you're already here. What are some ways that you have found to either cover that objection in advance, or your strategy or approach at asking questions to make sure that doesn't even happen, like you don't run into procrastination as much, or you can speak to how you cover it on the back end if it does come up. But how do you tackle those things?
Sure. So, I mean, yeah, you're right. We deal with procrastination like anybody else. I think it's just to a different extent. I would say for a lot of my clients now, so I tell people, like, there's a difference between procrastinating and like strategically waiting to do something. There are times where it doesn't make sense to pull the trigger on stuff. And there were times in March and April where I had whole strategies that the difference between implementing them, the strategy makes sense and it will still make sense 10, 20 years, but the implementation timing is pretty important to certain things. As far as, do we accelerate certain things and slow things down? There's things we can't possibly foresee, like the COVID scenario. But as far as how do we kind of get out in front of things like that so we minimize the opportunity to have people procrastinate? We talked a little bit about this. It's a fine line between, poking the bear, essentially getting people to get really uncomfortable in your meetings. Obviously, since this is designed for growth in businesses, and there's people from all different tenures in the audience, looking at it from when you're working with like anybody, conceptually, people, I think intuitively know that they need to do stuff in our business. They know they need to save money and they need a plan and stuff like that. But a lot of them are smart and they think that they might have it all under control and covered. And it's not until you get them to start asking questions and start to lean in and start to go, well, maybe I don't know, that they actually take action. So that's what I mean by poking the bear. The bigger than the client, the bigger you got to poke that damn thing. Okay, you got to really jab them, because a new person hasn't even given a new professional, 25 years old, hasn't really given much thought to a lot of these things. Someone 55 plus with some wealth in businesses, they have, but they think that they've done things. So you really got to get in there and stir it up to get them to feel uncomfortable to that extent, right? But as far as procrastination in general, I just position the conversation to where they're going to feel really bad if they procrastinate. So part of that is, we'll talk about the insurance side of things or whatever it is. Me, I'm 28 and, I have some health issues that make me uninsurable. So whenever I kind of, open up to them, I'm not a very emotional person. Anyone who knows me, that's not kind of my thing, but I'm honest, right? And so I tell people, like, there's a legitimate concern because nothing's ever going to happen to people. But I didn't think about that when I was hit by a semi on a motorcycle. I have pretty severe, degenerative rheumatoid arthritis, where I'm probably going to have a pretty significant loss of mobility in my hands at a really young age. Like, this stuff's real. It just doesn't happen to them, right? But yeah, so when you say stuff like that and you say, by the way, when do you want that medical done? They're really uncomfortable when they're like, oh, let me think about it. They're like, yeah, you're right. I kind of feel like a jerk if I don't do this because, I'm trying to be honest with them. So yeah. I just, that's about the only piece of vulnerability I give my clients, but it works.
Super good. So just 2 seconds on this, and then Nick, I'll have you kind of answer the same. So one of the things that kind of dissecting what Matt just said, guys, if you're on here and you're an advisor, you're in insurance on either side, or you're doing both, one of the biggest misconception I've seen in this industry is people get into this space because they want to help people, which is true. That's not the misconception. People really want to help people. But the way that most people view helping people is being nice to people. And it's actually quite the opposite. And you see this in Matt, you'll see it in Nick, is that they at some point, what Matt's speaking to is you realize that you cannot serve people and be nice simultaneously. It means that you can build rapport with people and create trust. But this is fundamental, is that do you want people on your deathbed to say, oh, that was Matt, who's just a really, nice guy. He's a great, nice guy. Or do you want them to say, that was Matt, he actually changed my life because he helped me take action on things that I wouldn't have done otherwise. And so I hope that's what you're hearing and what Matt's saying, is that you have to create pain and create urgency to serve people, because people need that to move through procrastination and fear to take action. And that's what I think Matt references in poking the bear. So such a really important and valid point.
I jokingly say a lot, though, it's a newer reps and advisors and stuff like that, is like, my clients probably don't like me, which is fair, but I promise you, like, they love me and they can't live without me. So as long as that stays the case, they'll keep me around for a bit. So
totally. I love it. They respect is big. Nick, you want to speak to this? So procrastination, objection, and maybe you can kind of hone into, like, in the last 6 months, people, could have all the reasons in the world to, not take action, just be paralysis by overanalysis with the market and everything else. How have you helped people move forward anyway? Because you've brought in, so much in terms of assets under management, particularly in the last 6 months. So what are you doing to help overcome, procrastination, fear, and help people take action?
Yeah, I think just to take a step back, and before asking any clients to move forward with the solution that you provide, one of the things that we learned when we sold bookstore door back in the day, like you'd hit on, was nobody likes to be sold. And so one of the things I spend a lot of time doing on the phone and before every appointment is giving a really, really big buying atmosphere. I think this is one of the ways that I avoid the procrastination objection. And I let everyone know, hey, look, this is something that I've done for a ton of other clients. If it's a good fit for you, great. If not, no big deal. I promise I'm not going to send you a bill in the mail like a lawyer would for our time, right? Keep it really short and sweet, but letting everybody know that whatever solution we're providing, whatever I'm recommending, you do have the option to say no. You don't owe me anything, for prospective clients or folks that we're trying to visit with. And what I've found is when they're in person or even over Zoom, I can see their body language become a lot more relaxed. And they're like, okay, I can make a decision. I don't feel pressured in this moment. So going back to what you were talking about previously of how do we avoid it, I'm not impervious to the procrastination objection. I get it just like everybody else does. But I think allowing people to make a decision and not feeling pressured is really, really key. And it doesn't matter how good of a solution you're providing. If people feel pressured or feel like they're not able to make a decision, then they won't. And oftentimes too, what I've found is if you do get the procrastination objection, sometimes that's not the real objection. So I think digging deeper. So if I'm calling a client and I say, hey, we need to do this now, like back in March where we're trying to put money to work and the market's down 30%, and they say, well, call me back in 2 weeks. Well, Tim, I can call you back in 2 weeks, but what's going to change, right? Why would I call you back in 2 weeks? So I think really digging deep to understand that pain point, and oftentimes they're going to tell you the real objection at that point. So I think those are the two really important ways that you avoid that procrastination objection. Going back to March timeframe, I was a lot like Matt. He talked about poking the bear, and I was just relentless back in March and April in my pursuit of this is exactly what we need to be doing. I was so convicted with every fiber in my body of this is what we need to do, and you need to do it now. And it's funny, but people will follow your conviction.
Yeah. And there's so many good nuggets and everything you just said. Just on the buying atmosphere. I mean, one of the things that it's so true, like it's having the right words. And then, if you're in the audience listening here, one of the things that you'll hear just what Nick's not saying, but you can hear it in his voice, in his tone of voice. So he actually really believes it. It's like if Nick actually sits down with someone and they're a no, he is 100% okay with it. And he means it because he has 300 other phone calls to make that week. He's got a massive pipeline of prospects, that are just waiting on him. And that's a great place to be in your business. And so, buying atmosphere, to Nick's point, is so much, it's saying the right words so that but it's also the feeling that you're projecting, your conviction, your confidence, and just knowing that, hey, I'm okay if it's not the right fit, and really meaning it. Because it's not just, you're not just holding on to this one, please, I just need one client this month. That's not Nick. He's got a lot going on. It's true for Matt too. So this will be a great transition into a follow-up question on this, Nick, for you. And I can, Matt, if you want to contribute to this, you can too. How do you make sure your pipeline doesn't dry up? Like, what's your approach to making sure that you do have that abundance mentality, literally, because you have people to call? Like, what's been your process to make sure you've got the names and the people in front of you, and that doesn't dry up?
Yeah. So I read a book called The Game of Numbers back when I first started into this industry, and it's written by Nick Murray. Coaches a lot of advisors. Most of you on this call probably recognize that name. And one of the things he talked about is you should be prospecting a minimum of 2 hours a day. And your prospecting changes over time, whether that's sourcing names through introductions, whether that's doing seminars, whether that's cold calling. I don't care what it is, but it's something that we never stop doing throughout our career, or shouldn't stop, is what he talks about. And for me, I've noticed since I've made that a practice every day, that I am able to keep that abundance mentality versus scarcity mentality. When someone does tell me no, it's no big deal. It allows me to keep a really authentic and genuine buying atmosphere to where I'm cool with no. I prefer no, and it's going to get me closer to my next yes.
I love that. Super good. Matt, you want to chime in on this? Basically, the follow-up question was, how do you make sure your leads don't dry up? How do you make sure you have a consistently full pipeline? I know that's been the case for you, is that you're rarely, if ever, been wanting for new leads. That's never been a complaint that you've had. So what is it about how you do and what you do to make sure that you don't have the tumbleweed going through your empty pipeline?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. I mean, like Nick mentioned, a lot of it is an abundance mentality. Just like when you hit the first high producing goal, all of a sudden you realize that you can always have pipeline if that's what you want. And the more you can control it, the more likely the outcome is. As far as how do you still, mindset can't solve all problems. Like I cannot wish clients into my book of business, right? So I still have to do a little bit of work. But really, really strategic partnerships with my clients on how I get involved. I think there's been two things that I've seen and I've reflected on recently around, like, how is it that I'm, so there are some people here at my firm that are on the list. So if anyone asked, I didn't say this, but yes, I may not necessarily be the best prospector in the world, yet somehow business keeps flowing. So it's not that I'm not obviously doing anything. It's just how we're going about things is a little different. So one is, again, we do relatively complicated planning, even with clients that may not necessarily need so much complicated planning, but they understand that what we've done is I'm pretty ingrained in my clients. I was just out in California with one. I got to hang out on his yacht and have a pretty good time. Like, life could be worse, right? But that doesn't come from just a transactional relationship. I was there to meet his family and talk about some, estate planning and multi-generational stuff. And you're really ingrained there, but a lot of it is very strategic. People that I know I need to get to, by a proxy of my client, but it's almost impossible to avoid getting to them because at some point they're business partners, their family, their close friends. There's always something that connects them financially. So when I get involved that heavily with the influential person, it's hard not to need to talk to that next person, and they understand that. So they have no problem usually connecting me with them. And a lot of times coordinating the meeting too, which is kind of helpful. They're really overpaid like staff, right? But they're helpful. And that's been a very, very big thing for me is, well, I know that person has a really successful partner. In the next 3 to 6 months, I will be meeting with that person. They just don't know it yet, but they're going to be the ones that kind of coordinate that meeting.
Yeah, I would just chime in to kind of pick up on what you're saying there. I said that if Nick's the Arnold Schwarzenegger of financial advising, you're the Bobby Fischer. So if you don't know who Bobby Fischer is like the world-renowned chess champion. And this is literally, anybody who's a grand champion of chess is just thinking, 15 steps ahead. And that's 100% true with Matt. Like, the way you look at a relationship, you're building rapport with someone that you've been serving really well. And in that rapport, you're just totally strategic, at this point, probably subconsciously just picking up cues of who are these relationship and business partners they work with that I could mutually serve in the same way. And then you're just directly asking for that specific person, right? I mean, that's, it's just, playing chess, you see the relationships, you see the spread, you see these other business elements, the family connections, the partners, and you're specifically going and just saying, hey, I should probably meet Doug. And they're like, you should probably meet Doug. And you just wave your Jedi hand and they say,
exactly. That go to Jedi mind tricks. I'm like, I will be working with this person.
Yeah.
So,
but very targeted, right? Like, so
yes,
you're asking
absolutely.
specific introductions.
Yep. And then like the other component there was also, I guess like for instance, Nick and I being in the same business, and even here with other reps in the office, people assume that in the sales environment, it has to be 100% competitive. There is such a market in Texas. I'm sure Nick can attest to it. And we can work all over the country. There is no shortage of people, but people automatically assume that because we're in a similar industry that we can't talk because we're, he's the devil. And the reality is, like, some of my biggest referral sources and clients are in our business. There are just things that they don't do. And I have pretty big relationships with people that you would just not think that they are relevant to our business. Very niche lenders for business owners, right? That work in a very specific market. but like no one just calls them. And it's like, oh, hey, can I just get on your calendar for 10 minutes so I can see if there's a place that you can help my clients out? You'd be surprised how many doors that's opened.
That's huge. I love hearing that. Really good skill-based question. So here's what we're going to do. There's 5 minutes left, guys. I'm going to take the last 60 seconds to make sure we close this out properly, maybe the last couple of minutes. So if you've got a just fire burning question that you want to ask these guys, use the Q&A tool and you can toss your question up there. So we've gotten into some meat with some of the skill-based work. We've talked about mindset. We could honestly probably do another one of these and spend, another hour and dig even deeper. But with the time that we have, if you've got any pertinent questions that you want to ask, feel free to chime in on that Q&A and I'll ask the question. One last question I have is around systems, and just take 60 seconds, both of you guys, and answer this as succinctly as you can. But come March, a lot of us started working from home. Obviously, you guys are back in the office today. A lot of us are kind of moving back into offices, but there's still a lot of remote work happening. How do you maintain your schedule when things have been more remote? So easily to get distracted. How do you maintain that schedule?
Are you asking us a question?
Yeah, sorry, Matt. You can kick it off first. I just kind of thought anybody would grab it, but you go ahead, Matt. Nick, share on this.
Yeah, it's funny because again, like I said, I think it goes back to what is your end game? What are you trying to accomplish? And you could ask my girlfriend who's on this call, and in our business now, that I took this as an opportunity to, and obviously I'm in the office right now, but I took it as an opportunity to essentially, I got to get rid of commuting time, and they don't know if I showered or not. You know how much time I added back to my schedule? I have, I'm keeping more meetings. You can ask my girlfriend, I am working more from like in a 10-hour perspective than I was here, because I can just hammer meetings out left and right. And because all my clients are doing the same thing, it's not like it's a conflict where they expect more time than they know in 30 minutes we can do what we normally would have done in an hour, because we're all slammed. So it's an opportunity. Absolutely. But I'm working more, which means I have more at-bats and more likely to get the outcome that I want.
Love it. So reinvesting that travel time in order to set more meetings, et cetera. And so you're filling up your schedule more. I love it. Nick, chime in on this one. How do you keep that schedule flow when things are a little wonky?
Yeah. So I think coming into the office, I mean, I've been fortunate that we didn't close down my office building, and that Edward Jones made the decision to allow us to still work out of our offices. So really, I mean, it's like nothing's changed other than I'm not having to travel to lunch appointments or travel to go visit with a client at their office. And so to Matt's point, it's much easier. I mean, what might have taken me an hour and a half to get through is taking me 45 minutes. I mean, it's just, for whatever reason, these Zoom calls are much quicker, much more to the point. The rapport factor, of the first 5-10 minutes of the phone call is a little bit shorter. So it's been great in the sense I've been able to have a lot of appointments and be really, really efficient with my time. But I think being in the office, for me, I love it so much, being able to separate work and home, right? And so being able to come into the office for me has kept me really grounded through all of this. So
good. Guys, I could go on and on. I honestly, you guys have a wealth of knowledge to share, but I love how simple it is at the same time. I mean, the theme here, if you're on the call, is work ethics there, schedules on there. They have a mindset of conviction in what they do. And even though we want to learn all the technical fun stuff, that's the heartbeat of what makes someone successful. And it's a transformation of mindset that's really important. So love hearing that from two guys who, before they even turned 30, had huge impacts in this business and are making waves. So look forward to seeing what you guys continue to build and do.